We are under quarantine. I'm guessing everybody here that's a communications person is extremely busy because communication world doesn't stop. So we'll get going, and those that join can fill in where needed. So thank you everybody for being here. I know everyone is extremely busy, and it's impressive if you can even remember what day it is, let alone log on to a webinar. So we appreciate you being here. I'm Alexis Fermanis. I'm your moderator today. I'm the communications director at the Society of Industrial and Office Realtors here in DC, and a member of ASAE's Communications Professionals Advisory Council. And yes, that's a mouthful, where we aim to find the latest and greatest communication trends and share them with the industry. Our work there is what inspired today's session. Today, everybody will be muted, and we encourage you to ask questions using the chat or Q&A feature. Some of you have already figured that out, which is great. We will do our best to respond to these questions, most likely at the end of the session during the final Q&A portion, unless something seems extremely relevant at the time that we're talking about it. I'm really excited to introduce you to our panelists. Thank you all for being here. Also on the Communication Council with me is Dina Lewis. She's president of Distilled Logic and founder of the Content Forum. She provides content strategy, coaching, and consulting for associations and nonprofit organizations, and also founded reviewmycontent.com as well. And that's a site for reviewing content tools and services. If you're interested, you can message her about it. She has a great deal of knowledge and is a great person to know. Here with us also in the bottom of your screen, well, bottom for me, I'm not sure where she is, but here also is Courtney Reyers, Senior Manager of Digital Strategy at American Society for Microbiology. She is an award-winning digital strategist, a change agent, and self-proclaimed developer whisperer. I like that. There's a lot of content online, and she's really good at using data and metrics to ensure content strategy elevates that content to the top of the searches. And last but not least, Erica Salm Rench is Director of Customer Success at RASA, leading client and market success by maximizing audience engagement with the use of artificial intelligence. It's very cool. We use their platform. She gets to blend her love of marketing and customer success in order to support fellow content-minded marketers. She really understands that content space, and she'll have a unique perspective in our discussion today. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let's dive right in. We are in uncertain times, and the theme of this session, fears and forecasts, has never been more relevant. I think I can safely say that as communicators, we are busier than ever navigating new content, messaging to our audiences, all while maintaining our already regularly full schedules. 2020 has already and will continue to be quite a year, to say the least. I'm sure you all can agree. Our fears and forecasts since creating this session has obviously changed, just as everything seems to be changing on a daily basis here. We're inundated with pandemic-related news, but our communications world doesn't stop spinning. We adapt and we modify. Our content today will be extremely valuable and relatable, and we'll get through this together. So to begin, videos and podcasting are exploding even more so now. Online meetings are the new norm, just like what we're in right now. So I want to start by asking each panelist the same question. What one big change have you seen or experienced during this transition of remote working that may carry through going forward? And Dina, we'll start with you.
Okay, sure. So just trying to get the view right here. Oops. Yeah. Okay. So from my standpoint, I think what the challenge has been, as you said, with everybody kind of shifting with the crisis, is what has been the ability for associations to really pivot from their day-to-day operations to the crisis communications plan. So was that effective, I think would be number one. The second thing would be the ability to kind of pivot, and we were just talking about this in the Content Forum community yesterday, is this idea of transitioning, right? So we know we're in crisis mode, but some of the folks that I'm talking to on the council, Alexis, and just throughout the communications and marketing community, is that people are already starting to transition to whatever this new reality is. So I think the ability to pivot effectively is truly based in the organization's content strategy. Is the content that they're delivering in crisis mode or in this new reality mode mission focused, tailored to the audience, and getting the info that's needed to the people who need it when they need it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And are you finding that you think that that sort of content is going to be carried through going forward? It's just going to be a new way of producing our content?
Yeah, I think the channel thing is definitely a decision point, right? Everybody that had to either immediately flex their in-person meetings to online delivery, or changing different channels than they might have traditionally had, because maybe certain people couldn't access certain things at a point in time, and they had to reach their members or their constituents in another format, just because of their work or because of the work from home and all those kind of things. So I think the channel piece is also another challenge, which is part technological, but also content. Is your content available on all the different channels that you have?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Making sure your content is on every channel possible. Courtney, same question. I'll just repeat it. What one big change have you seen or experienced during this transition of remote working that can carry through going forward?
So for the American Society for Microbiology, we're sort of in this fire and ice spot of, we're going through the same hardships that everyone else is facing, but we're also the American Society for Microbiology. So we kind of hit the jackpot, not to sound callous, right? So I think the biggest thing that I've seen for the organization having to pivot is our tone and our messaging. So we've got all our channels kind of aligned, but we canceled our meetings and we're working on a plan to make those virtual. But for our typical drip campaigns for membership and things like that, people were getting mad. And on Twitter, we're like, well, I was going to renew until you sent me this message reminding me to renew in a time where I'm like going through all this crazy stuff. So we really just started truly nurturing and saying thank you and really changing, because our people are literally working on the crisis. They're in vaccine development, they're testing people. They're the people who, our 30,000 members, about 20% of our membership are clinical microbiologists, and they were the ones hounding us to hound the FDA for them to relax their standards, so they're really in the mix. And we just had to pivot really quickly to make sure we wrote a letter to the FDA, and that happened really quickly. We're just pivoting to be more rapid, and then just relaxing our tone and doing more of a soft ask on the products that we do want to keep elevated throughout this time.
How are you finding the balance between being reactive to, urgent requests that are coming in, and lining that up with any of your strategic initiatives as well?
So that was actually pretty easy, because I sit in the marketing communications team, and I'm more on the science communication side, being a content strategist, but I've sort of wiggled into this role of being systems designer too, at the organization, having launched the CMS and integrating with the AMS, and I just deployed our marketing automation system. So I kind of have my fingers in all the pies. So when the content requests or asks come in from the leadership team, I'm really able to quickly kind of pull those things together, just because of the place I am right now. We also got ahead of, we were building in January, we started on the science communication side, making sure that we were ready for a resource hub for any kind of outbreak, because this happens every time. When Ebola breaks, or H1N8, swine flu, or anything happens, it's sort of the same drill. They want to talk to the experts. We need to get the facts out there, yada, yada, yada. So we said, let's start doing that. And we were actually working on one for the flu when this happened. So we had the templates ready in our system. We just pulled all of our experts, because we are in a prime position to be able to just tap our members and say, hey, you're literally, Dr. Fauci is one of our members, right? So it's like, we can get that content ready to go really quickly. So we're poised at a little bit of a different place. And I'm sure there's some other folks on the call from other scientific societies who may be at a similar advantage. So that pivot was pretty easy for us, because we had such close contact to the folks that people want to hear from.
That's great. I'm sure your calls are off the hook right now. Very busy, but it's good to be busy. Erica, same question for you in terms of the change you're experiencing.
So I was just thinking about how it's so funny when the four of us got together and planned the session a week ago, how my answer has even changed since a week ago. I was initially thinking about how associations, being trusted resources, have done such an incredible job of just making sure to, one, produce the content, that people need to understand what's going on that's relevant. Courtney gives exceptional examples of that. And then 2, disseminating it. But then taking it to a bigger level, that's the way that, right, associations can be generous, right? They're producing the resources, the trusted resources that people need to consume to stay ahead of the crisis. But beyond that, I think we've seen this incredible shift throughout the world in generosity. I mean, Verizon just sent me a message saying that I get free data for the rest of the month. All of our digital platforms are offering free months of, subscriptions, and you see messages in apps about what educators can have for free, which is incredible. And obviously we're just at the beginning of this inevitable economic downturn. And so I anticipate that this wave of generosity will have to continue because people are soon going to be resource scarce. So it's the time when we have to think about what can we do for our customers, what can we do for our members. We're offering a free COVID newsletter to anyone who wants to sign up at RASA. And this isn't just, read our RASA COVID newsletter. It's, do you want to use our software to share a free COVID resource newsletter with your members, with your customers? So I think it's the age of generosity, and I think we're just at the beginning of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, we definitely utilized that service as well, which was great to have. Courtney, especially, you mentioned changing the tone in your conversations, and there's a push now to create a more natural conversation, not just with COVID, but just trending in general, 2020 for content. And so, Courtney, to utilize personal content generated from users that helps offer greater authenticity, how can associations capitalize on user-generated content? And in what ways are you finding it, using it, and seeing it useful?
Yeah, so I've always been a big believer in this. At my last job, I worked at the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and I really learned the power of user-gen content. We launched a campaign, Dina may remember this because she worked with me there too, called You Are Not Alone, where we shared the personal stories of suicide survivors. And I mean, I remember going to work every day and just crying, coming in and reading these things because they were so moving. And that was such a powerful example that I tried to carry that forward with me everywhere I go now. And, on the plus side of that, our donations also shot through the roof. We were up like 44% for the year because we were busting stigma, offering a place where people could lean on each other. And then, also people love to see that support. And NAMI does really great work anyways. And again, at ASM, we have the advantage. At an association, I'm a big believer of value add content, original content, and you should tap your members. So one of the first things I did when I arrived at ASM, I just had my 5-year anniversary. In 2016, we launched a series of blogs. So our website was strictly for transactional, renew and join your membership. That was it. There was no content outside of our journals. So we have about a corral of about 20 volunteer members right now who all work in the science. And to me, that's our user gen. We are working on new campaigns. We're going to kind of start celebrating all the things our members are doing to help during this crisis. So we're going to start interviewing them. We just did something like that for Public Health Awareness Week last week because these folks are busy. They don't really have time to write. So we need to jump in and sort of do the ghostwriting and the interviewing for them. But our blogs single-handedly bring about 700,000 unique views to the website every year. And so having them, it's good for them. It's a lot of the younger scientists coming in and getting that professional development. And writing and getting their names out there. And it's great for us because these folks are experts. So I know that's a little different than user gen content, but for what we do, it's the perfect platform to really, because we've got to vet everything, politically and scientifically and make sure it's accurate and it falls in line with what ASM does. So to me, that's sort of a very strict version of user gen content. And we offer it up as a volunteerism opportunity with ASM. If you'd like to join, it's not sort of a we pick and choose. Anyone can kind of roll in and do that.
No, I think that's a great point because sometimes it is very hard to get user generated content. And so there are other strategies to acquiring that through, a call for volunteering or perhaps ghostwriting and tapping into that is still another way that sometimes people don't think about. Some of that costs money, some of that doesn't, but even if one member is not able to write it, you may not even have to pay for ghostwriting. There might be other members that can collaborate together, and there are other ways to get unique about it.
I'm sorry to hog the mic, but I just saw a question pop up. We do some other things For user gen content, one of our biggest public outreach initiatives that we do is our AgriArt contest. So that gets us a ton of press coverage, a ton of participation and engagement from our users. So AgriArt, for anyone that doesn't know, is when the microbiologist will take any kind of microbe in a petri dish and create artwork out of it. And we've had some incredible entries. I don't know if any of you ever saw the handprint that was on the Today Show of the woman who took a scan of all the microbes on her child's hand, and it was so beautiful. That from our art contest. So those kinds of things, like people, it's fun for folks. And to me, that is user gen, because we manage that through Facebook on social. And we're trying to think about a way to move that to Instagram and just do it through a hashtag, because we get a ton of entries. But again, it's a little tricky. It's not just a free for all, because there are guidelines, right, to working in the lab with microbes, because folks are not always using the safe ones. So we have to be very careful about what the requirements are. And over the years, we've reached out to, where educators can do it with students in a very safe, controlled setting. So as long as someone follows the guidelines, they can participate.
That's Alexis, I have another social media example that I saw. The Club Management Association of America did a hashtag campaign during the crisis, because obviously a lot of the clubs were being forced to close because of the restrictions. But they did a CMAA Strong hashtag campaign on social media. And I noticed when I was following it that a lot of the club managers were doing outreach in their own communities, providing meals and things like that. But they were also converting their traditional Easter celebrations, where they would have the kids come for Easter egg hunts, and they created just packages that people could drive by and pick up. So they were still serving their members. And I think the association was gathering those stories that demonstrated the CMA Strong.
Yeah, it looks like one of our attendees is, which is great.
Hi, Melissa.
But no, I mean, that's a great example too. And that's the power of user generated content, because it provides that authenticity. It has that personal touch, which I think is so important for getting people to feel like they are heard, and that you are understanding, why they might be a member or want to join. So I think that works. Dina, since you were talking, I want to ask, how do you define that line between valuable user content and content that is too personal? For example, everybody's using memes nowadays and podcasts. Are those too personal? And, could they have a negative impact on your brand? And how do you walk that line?
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, of course, I'm going to go back to the strategy piece and who are you targeting with that meme, right? I can see memes being successfully used in community spaces, for example, right? Because there's a stronger connection there. People know each other, and it's also somewhat private depending on how your community's set up. I think if you're targeting your student population with memes, you can kind of lighten the tension at some point if in a medical organization, if people are waiting to get their residency assignments, maybe you're going to float a meme about, the students anxiously awaiting what that school assignment is going to be made, those kind of things. So I think that's one way to kind of keep it personal. And Courtney's earlier point about tone, have the brand kind of how you want to address that part of your audience group, but still keep it light and keep it, hitting people where they are, and a meme that's going to make sense to them versus maybe another segment of your membership that it wouldn't be.
Yeah, we're sort of, I was going to say, sorry, Dina, we're sort of like in this interesting juxtaposition right now where we're far away from everyone, but we're like inviting people into our homes at the same time. So I think people are kind of like grasping for ways that they can make things more personal, even though we're physically far away from each other right now.
Yeah,
I think that's a good point.
That's a really great point. It lowers the barrier, right? The things
Right.
that traditionally have the line between professional and personal is weird right now.
Really, yeah, very strange.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see how it does translate when we do start to have some reentry in terms of how we are going to continue some of the personalization that we've tried to foster, and see how that works. And of course, it is, as Sherry's mentioned, it is based on your association as well and your membership. But I do agree that I think everybody's trying to have a more personal, lighthearted approach to things to get to get through this as much as possible. So
Can I make one other point on the valuable side of the content? Because I wanted to share another example. Terry Anderson from ACES International did a webinar on Content Forum with Nancy Green last year, and they actually shared their framework that they had for their councils and volunteers of how they wanted to get content from them. So they actually shared the content creation framework, and they have an outline where they actually determine, you know, here's the type of content that we're relying on you as subject matter experts to create and share with us. And then, to Courtney's point, it can be vetted by the professionals within the association and distributed on the association communication vehicles. So I think that's another way, is just, again, setting up a structure or format for the information you need from them, and then recruiting those volunteers or experts to create that for you.
That's a great point, ensuring that there's a platform to establish that as well. This question's for anyone, and it kind of follows this in terms of, we're seeing so much personal content now, especially everyone being quarantined and sort of having to produce everything themselves, or people are feeling a little bit more brave. Maybe it's the alcohol that more people are consuming, who knows? But more people are putting themselves out there and producing their own content. And obviously we can't be with one another to trying to reach out to our usual influencers. I'm wondering if we're thinking we're going to see a switch, and we're already starting to see a switch away from celebrity influencers to real life local influencers. For example, in Iceland, a British supermarket chain switched from using their celebrity influencers to real life local moms, and it offered greater validity in their marketing. So I'm wondering if we're going to start to see even more micro influencers or real life people as we go back into the workforce. If anyone has a thought on that.
I mean, I would agree with that, because I feel like at this point, like, everyone knows who Fauci is, right? So like, I feel like, and he was a rock star scientist, obviously, but you know, the director for our board of governors for our American Academy of Microbiologists, Arturo Sandoval, is always on CNN now. So these people who were, you know, high level members to us, but we're just kind of regular Joes, are now, because of what's going on, elevated to sort of rock stardom in the news. And I think the same was happening with moms. I don't know if anybody else in the crowd has had experience that with their membership or seeing anything similar, but depending on, I think, how you pivot and what you come up with, you know, those, I kind of like that elevation of normal people, because I mean, as terrible as everything is right now, it's sort of bringing us together on a whole other level. And I think people have to be more thoughtful. And I kind of like the change that I'm seeing in the marketing that's happening to me, you know? So I think that the answer is yes. I think we'll see more micro influencers, like, no pun intended on my side, but I'm seeing people that I don't think I would have ever seen before. I mean, Fauci's been in the news plenty of times, but, you know, as far as our other members, and the level of press interaction we're getting it's definitely skyrocketed.
And there's also just an increased level of, I think, care and concern for the content that, like, the small businesses around you are putting out. I know we're all kind of getting inundated with emails and communications right now, but I think people just have concern for how the small businesses that they interact with on a daily basis are faring. And so it's interesting to see, you know, you might be opening a lot more emails from, like, mom and pop store down the street than you would have if they were, like, solely marketing to you.
Yeah.
That's a good point. And also talking about the type of content we get now, Erica, a lot of people think of content marketing as clickbait. And we're now living in an age where people are getting their news from social media, and SEOs and clicks and shares are more prevalent than ever. How do we ensure the content we produce, receive, like, and share is credible? How, as an industry, do we counteract that fake news and clickbait?
Well, we always say at RASA that the magic happens when the human curation meets the AI curation, because you can't get perfectly curated content that's all, you know, valuable and credible without the element of human curation there. So whatever systems you're using to automate dissemination and personalize, there has to be, someone at the front of that at the beginning. So for us, we allow people to make sure that they're able to pre-approve all of the content sources that they use. They have like an easy way to scan any article that might even qualify to go out to their users before it's disseminated. At RASA, a lot of our internal systems depend on automations. We use Zapier for a lot of to make our internal processes much easier. But setting up all of those Zapiers and automations and integrations are people. So, making sure that the human element, there is like a layer of supervision over all of those automations and integrations. And then once you, set yourself up for success in that way, then, the content revision process can be a lot easier, can be a lot more streamlined. And then you can feel confident that you're passing along valuable content that has, that was produced with integrity to your subscribers and your members.
That's a great point. Yeah. Similarly, Courtney, do you think likes and shares truly translate to ROI, and how are you measuring the success of the content that you're producing?
Oh man, I always feel like I end up on this same soapbox. I'm like a one algorithm woman. So I think a challenge that we have at ASM, and I don't think it's unique to ASM, is before I get to the main answer, is we have a lot of lack of structural, technical systems, and some siloing that's prevented us from being truly streamlined on, what's our strategy and how do we measure that, right? And that sounds like very simple. So to me, I think the slow change management piece that's gone along with our digital transformation is really that shift from like the fire hose of email to content marketing. And so for the ROI on that, it's a multi-pronged answer. I'm a big believer in that long tail. I'm sure everybody knows who Gary Vaynerchuk is, Gary V, and his philosophy where you give, and then you ask, right? Whereas when I came on board, it was just asking all the time. And that translates, on email channel to, unsubscribes, right? So that to me, one of the major roles of a content strategist, I know that people like to separate content strategy and content marketing, but I believe that they're intertwined, and really bringing that injection of content strategy to your marketing team if it's not there. And so ROIs can be a little tricky because it's hard to measure long tail, right? And clicks and likes, probably they don't equal dollars, right? Over that you can immediately measure and be like, oh, and if you could find a nonprofit that has that set up in their Google Analytics with the price on it, like call me because I want to work there, because I haven't seen it yet. So I think, and I was listening to a podcast. This is kind of amazing, but I returned from Asia in mid-January, like right before everything went down. And I was listening to a podcast because we were flying on Korean Air. And I don't know how much everybody knows about South Korea, but they invest in their country like a brand. And so the government funds like K-pop, K-drama, like the skincare, all the stuff that we love about South Korea. The government funds all that stuff because their philosophy is a rising tide floats all boats. So that's sort of the tack I take when I come into an association that doesn't have the infrastructure to be able to really quickly measure ROI, is just polish all the areas that over the years, or you're eventually going to see that ROI in general. You're going to see higher traffic on your website. Therefore, you're going to see higher clicks on your CTAs, and revenue is going to go up in your journals and your meetings and your membership and all those things.
Right. How do you keep people relevantly, even if you're not, like you say, asking, how do you stay top of mind for someone so that when they do need whatever, we work with B2C organizations as well, who, they're ultimately trying to sell their product. And how do they stay top of mind? So when someone is ready to like buy their shoes once a year, they think of that brand, even if every single email doesn't necessarily translate to a dollar return.
Absolutely. And something that I do with all the teams that I work with when we're building the website, usually that's when I'm hired, is to do a redesign, is I take them through a user funnel. And I always say, okay, what's our first kiss look like? Like, what are our points of entry? And like, what does it look like when we're married? Like, what does a super user look like, or an influencer look like for ASM? And that can look like 10 different things. You know, you could be an editor-in-chief on a journal. You could be coming to our meeting every year. You could be on our board of directors, right? So I think just having your teams work through that and think through that over time, it will establish things that you can actually measure, because a lot of times those things are missing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a great point. Yeah, thank you. Erica, micro-targeting is a valuable tool that can also help with some of what we were just discussing, and it's helpful to target specific users with relatable content. Due to specialized niche targeting, often using artificial intelligence, we're grouping audiences into smaller homophilic groups, you know, which could be otherwise known as algorithmic tribalization. And how is AI impacting this grouping and targeting? And how can we avoid over-segmenting where groups and targeted messages just become too narrow and specific?
I think that's a really good question. I think ultimately when you embark on using a new technology, specifically with regard to AI, because of those silos that people can get put in, you have to make sure you ask of the technology, of the brand, how do you ensure that people don't end up in an echo chamber of their own thoughts and questions? So, you know, to use our emails as an example, we personalize only up to 80% of the content in our emails. We do leave a portion of the content to randomization, so to speak, so that people aren't only given content that is a reflection of their past reading behaviors. And so in that way, we try to continue to better inform the world in such a way that's not, again, putting people in an echo chamber of their own clicks and reading habits.
Yeah, and the same can be said, Dina and Courtney, for you all as well, in what you're doing in terms of how are you grouping your content and segmenting your audiences to make sure that you are giving them the content that they want and making sure that they get the content that they need as well, but you aren't also either leaving out the content that they might want that they don't know that they want, or excluding people that might be wanting that content. There's a lot there, but
Yeah,
if either of you want to answer.
Yeah, I think, well, Courtney, you can probably speak to the preference center piece of that part of it. I would just speak more broadly, just in kind of how the information architecture influences the web design these days. I mean, topics are clearly a thing, right? So most of the organizations I work with now are topically tagging their content in some way, because that's going to allow this personalization down the road. But what I think is really fascinating, and I don't think associations are there yet with their data analysis. They may be collecting a lot of the data that could answer this question, but we haven't gotten there with the analysis yet, is if we put someone in a pigeonhole by virtue of, you know, their member type or their time in their career or whatever those things are, actually watching their journeys of the usage of your content on the web or in face-to-face meetings or purchases of books and other things, I just wonder how much that really matches up. Because I think about myself, you know, ASAE member on associations now, but because I'm a consultant and content touches so many different places, I belong to all these different lists. So what does my profile look like? I mean, I feel like I'm this like amorphous kind of amoeba or something that's out there. I don't even know if I'm using the right scientific terms, but I'm a blob, I feel like. I don't feel like I'm a pinpoint. So how many members in your organizations are like that, just because they've either, you know, not decided exactly what they want to do yet within your profession, or they've been around so long that they've done so many different things? I mean, how do you weight those kind of things to truly personalize the digital experience or the mail or the face-to-face experience with them? I don't
Exactly. Yeah,
know.
Courtney, I'll kind of follow up with that and ask you, you know, when we're segmenting and we're running the risk of building bias into our presumptive behavioral marketing models, and assuming we know the needs of these target groups, you know, how are we ensuring that we aren't leaving people behind? Is diversity of thought becoming obsolete? You know, how do we use big data nichification to lead to inclusion and not separation?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in there. I think there's a question for Erica though, in the chat.
Oh yeah, if you personalize 80% of content, does that mean 20% of messaging ignores personas? So, you know, to an extent, yeah, 20% of that content is going to be random, but random can be a scary word. It's random, but still within the parameters of what the user, the association, the company has decided to be relevant to their audience. So it's not 20% completely random content that Rasa throws in there, for example. It's 20% of content that's still been pre-approved by the sending organization, the association, the company, but not necessarily specifically for Erica or Courtney or Dina or Alexis.
Great.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, can you repeat the question for
Yeah,
me?
no. I want to, in terms of big data nichification, will that lead to greater separation of groups? Are we going to leave people out of the conversation, or will that help with inclusion?
Yeah, we're actually, I think maybe it's both. We're struggling with this a little bit at ASM right now because we just stood up a preference center for email segmentation based on our taxonomy for the website. So we have things parsed out by scientific topic based on the tracks at our meetings. And then we have obviously non-scientific topics and areas of importance to the society. So we'll have things like advocacy, global health, diversity, those kinds of things. And so we just stood this up literally, I think it was 2 weeks ago. So I'm sort of watching this happen. And this is a question that is becoming a problem because, you know, we need to be GDPR compliant. We want to make sure that we have a really respectful approach to the way we treat our members and users' data. And we also, I'm a big believer in giving people what they want, but I've heard a lot of stakeholders say to me, well, what if they don't know what they want? And I, you know, at first as a user expert, I'm like, well, then don't give it to them. But to Erica's point, when she was talking about that, you know, I have Flipboard on my phone. I'm on an Android. I know that's weird, but, and I go through it and I was in a little bit of an echo chamber. I clicked on, you know, that one barefoot Contessa video and now I'm seeing like all barefoot Contessa. I'm like, well, what about the other stuff in the world? I know there is, and there'll be that one story and I just click on that because it's different. So I know what that feels like as a user, but at work it can be hard to kind of separate that out. So I think you may get both. You're going to get that echo chamber effect and then but you also want to be granular and drive those niche things. And it's a little bit easy for some of our products. You know, we have the Clinical Virology Symposium. That is a very clear demographic of who's going to that meeting. And so when someone becomes a member and we're asking them to fill out their profile, at least we'll have that kind of information on them. You don't want to market that meeting to our whole marketing membership list because, you know, 20% of those people are probably going to be interested and then you don't want to get those unsubscribed. So again, I think that bridge can be crossed, not on the AI side like Erica's doing, but for us, it would just be what is our sort of general content and leaving space for that. You know, I'm trying to lead ASM to a place where we've got these Rasa.io based newsletters, but we're retaining the data preferences. And you need to leave air for stuff that is a high priority for their organization or just general interest, right?
Yeah.
Which is really easy to do right now with COVID, but we do have products, programs, and services that appeal to all of our members. So we always have to make sure we have space for that. And even if someone unsubscribes, we're even letting people unsubscribe from marketing products one by one if they wanted to, not that granular, but if you don't want to hear about our events, you really don't have to. But there's no way in HE double hockey sticks, these people are not going to see an ad for our annual meeting in the president's newsletter. You know what I'm saying? So we can always bridge that gap.
Right. I think that both Dina and Courtney hit on important points too, like the idea of, do people know what they want? And Dina talked about how she might not fit into a traditional predefined segment in a lot of ways. So another challenge for all organizations is, how do you get your information about people in real time? How do we all like be the Netflix of our various realms, you know, so that we can deliver people what they want based on their just-in-time behavior. What are they doing right in this moment, so that the data we have on them doesn't become stale and the preferences that they dictate don't become outdated. So I think that's a challenge for us all.
Right. Well, even with Netflix or Amazon, also you run the risk of, turning your users off if you get it wrong, right? And so how do you navigate that? I've talked to a lot of people about doing different surveys and how we can ask some people, but if they don't know what they want, I know for our members, when we give them different options, they just select everything, right? And they don't know what they want. They just, either they want nothing or they want everything. And then it turns out the people that wanted nothing are missing out, and they end up calling us saying, why aren't I getting anything? And I'm sure it's the same across the board for all of you. So it's how do you draw that line? And I think using data is going to be very valuable, but like you said, it's how do you get that data in real time and use it in the right way.
Well, and how much are we going to be screwing up our Netflix algorithms over this crisis? I mean, we're either going to be pushed random stuff.
Everything's Tiger King. Everything's Tiger.
Tired of, we already binged everything we really wanted to, and now we're like, oh, what's that? Who knows what's going to happen?
That's a really good point. I want to jump to a question now. We're almost done, but before I forget to it, we did get a question, forget from who, but from Bill, and he's asking about whether we think this temporary move toward all digital is going to become permanent, and seeing the possible constraints and how it can expose that digital divide that is in existence out there. How will we see that transition going forward? If anybody thinks they have a prediction.
Yeah, I'll start. I'm sure we all have an opinion on it, because as he mentioned here, we're not just seeing it in associations, we're seeing it in our own communities, right? With the schools issue and people's access to just information in general with the crisis going on. So I think from the association standpoint, I don't think it should go all digital. We still have print information that needs to be communicated, and just being able to reach people. So in that context, do you have your members' home addresses? How many magazines are going to end up piling up at office buildings over the next 6-12 months or whatever? And then from a contact perspective, if people are disintermediated digitally, do you have phone numbers so you could reach them by text? Do you have permission to text them? It opens all these questions about alternate ways of communicating with them. And I know just from conversations, again, in content forum, this was with a nonprofit group, they were just starting hearings and community meetings on water quality in the Detroit area when this thing all fell down. And they, half the people that they were trying to reach with this water information don't have computers at home, or they might not have data access readily. So that was their question, do we have to move to flyers, delivering it to people's homes, or do we have their phone numbers? Because most everyone does have a phone. So they could have at least, arranged traditional teleconferences versus webinars. So I think it's a great question, and something that associations need to be aware of.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Bill. My final question really for all of you would be, what other future predictions of content do you see? Whether it's artificial intelligence replacing the need for copywriters, or virtual content meetings becoming the new norm. What sort of predictions do each of you have, if you can, for the way we're going to see content going forward? Courtney, let's start with you.
I can't believe I'm saying this actually, because I've always been anti-paid content, but I've seen, especially in the last year or two, some really sophisticatedly handled paid content models that start with amazing content and really thoughtful subject lines. So I wouldn't be surprised, especially with the looming threat of journals going open access, and people are really going to have to rethink, is all content free? And I think when we go through something like this as the human race, with a big problem has always been, and is I think especially on blast right now, separating the fake news from the real news, and really being able to trust a content source. And that is something that's worth paying for right? So, I mean, right now, the New York Times and whatever paper you probably like, Washington Post have all opened up their COVID stuff for free, which is awesome during this time. But I mean, I think that as much as it pains me to say it, I think we may see a return to a paid subscription content model.
Or at the very least, firewalls still to be collecting all of that data. But yeah, absolutely. Erica, same question to you.
Yeah, I think in sort of a different angle, taking a different angle on the question, I think we're still going to see the continual advent of more tools that make our lives easier. I mentioned Zapier. There's a really cool new tool that we just discovered called Descript, which is a way to use AI to edit your podcast audio. So if any of you are doing podcasts out there, it is, so essentially you're recording your whole file, and then you can just type in edits to your voice, which, I mean, it's incredibly powerful. We're going to see things like that. There's an awesome, I'm totally blanking on it. So in the SEO world for content creators, obviously we know about, semantic SEO and the value of like having valuable, rich, somewhat of keyword mentions throughout our content. There are social media tools out there that, make sure to take into account Google's algorithm and help you as you structure your content to make it, most prevalent in those search engine results. So, I mean, there are just so many tools that are coming out that are going to make our lives easier, and then, make our content better with less effort.
That's a great point. And Dina, same question to you in terms of predictions. I know none of us have crystal balls, but
I wish. Yeah, I think one of the things that's most fascinating for me to see how it plays out is this shift in meetings. Joan Eisenstadt, one of the queens of the meeting industry, is fortunately an ASAE member, and she's been raising these questions constantly, but now it's like at a crescendo. And I think associations need to lead that effort, because it sounds like the hotel community may not be, right? Everybody's waiting to see, are they going to budge from kind of their traditional style of servicing meetings? So if associations are at the forefront of that, what can they do content-wise to create a blend, if it is going to be kind of a mix between in-person and virtual? And if it does tend more toward virtual over the immediate transitional future here, how do you create that value add of, and I'm seeing this on the chat, the networking and that human connection piece that we're so good at? It's not going to be the same on the screen, although I get desperate every day for, another meeting or a happy hour if I have to arrange it, if I must, just to see people. So how do you convey that in the meeting space and the conferences and the content that you're delivering there? So I'm anxious to see it. I don't know the answer to it, but I think there's a way we can kind of figure that out, because we've been forced into doing it now. So what pieces can we take from that and carry forward?
that's a great point. Yeah. I don't see any other questions. That is all the questions that I had time for, just as we had pared down this session a bit to modify it based on everything going on. I'll give another few seconds or so to see if there's any other questions, but thank you all so much for being here, especially during this time. It's a crazy time. I hope everybody stays healthy and sane as much as you can. And looks like there's no questions, so thank you all so much. I believe, is this recorded, Dina?
Yes.
Great. So we are going to, I'm working with ASAE to see if we can find a way to place this there. And hopefully we'll see some of you at the virtual session that they're having on April 30th as well, which we were kind of the leaders in getting our session going before ASAE got together with it. So they invited us to be there, but we had already had this scheduled. So
We did it early.
yeah, we were just early.
Yeah. Actually, Erica, somebody asked about that podcast
Yeah, I sent it. I typed it in, but it's called Descript.
Descript. Okay.
Descript.
And yes, on the CAE credit, my company Distilled Logic is a provider, so I will be sending you a confirmation that you attended this meeting, so you'll be able to use that.
Great. All right.
Thanks everyone so much.
Thank you all.
Everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you, Alexis.
Thanks.